I started into the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he is teaching, really helping people come into the truth of, who we are and what the powerful creative beings that we are, and using the mind to heal. There's hundreds of stories of transformation of people healing cancer, healing food sensitivities, healing Crohn's disease, anything, you name it. Healing neurological conditions where you're not able to talk and then all of a sudden you can talk. And it's all coming back to like the power of the mind, your energy, and what you're believing is possible for yourself.
Can you uh, explain what you mean by how you get to a point where you can use your mind in this way? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that don't want to give up gluten or want to get their gluten back, that may be interested, but say they're earlier in their journey. What was the work for you, and how do people make that change?
It's really coming back to the idea, I think, that what you think creates what you experience. And so, for example, when we are young, our subconscious mind is very open and it takes in everything around us without a filter. It's just taking things in. And so, if we, were around people or community that believed that conventional medicine, that you went to the doctor, you listened to the doctor, that was the only way, you follow the doctor's orders, they knew best about your body, then around age 7, I think, is when that kind of closes. And so then you start having that conscious awareness that you can, make choices and whatnot. But that subconscious is always functioning in the background. And so your lens is, I should follow what they're telling me because they know my body best. I should give my power to them. I should, even in the pandemic and all of this, like you could see where people were on that spectrum, and that was functioning in the background. And so you can consciously start changing that by reprogramming and rewiring your brain. And so he talks a lot about the brain and how in order to change, you need to create new neural pathways. And so you do that through repetition. So it could be something like where you are telling yourself a story that you want to create in your life, that you want to be like. I remember actually doing part of this, a little bit of this. I didn't really know Joe Dispenza at the time, but I would go to bed and I would say like, I am whole, I am happy, I am loved. Like I would start doing like those kinds of affirmations where my body doesn't feel any pain anymore. I can get up and my feet don't hurt, my hands don't hurt. So when you start telling yourself these stories, you're starting to rewire your brain. And when you create those new pathways over and over, the connections start connecting, and then that becomes real. Like you can actually, even if you're not experiencing yet, it can become something in your life because your brain is believing it.
Yeah, it makes sense as far as creating new pathways and new programming in your brain. Can you tie it back to how does that relate to the gluten, or how did that relate to you starting to say no in your life?
Yes. So it's not about something outside of myself that is giving me the healing. It's about something within myself that's giving me the healing. So the stories I'm choosing, the thoughts that I'm thinking, the things that I'm saying over and over again, if I believe that gluten is going to harm my body, gluten's going to harm my body. But if I then choose not to look at food with fear and I say, wait a second, um, yeah, like if I'm in a healing crisis, like I might need to realign if my body is telling me, as it was in that moment many years ago, gluten isn't good for you. Then I need to listen to the truth of my body and I need to own that. But then once you get out of that and you've healed, um, is it still true? And then can you tell yourself a different story? I was functioning a lot with the fear of gluten. So I didn't realize, but it was in my subconscious. And I would go out to eat and I'd be like, I can't have that. I don't want to, I don't want to get gluten. Like, I don't want to go back to the pain. But I wasn't consciously always like thinking that. It just was always there in the background. Like, gluten's going to hurt me. So then I had to consciously be like, wait a second, there are stories, there's possibility that it doesn't have to be. And I get to choose that. And I get to decide if that's going to be my reality or not. And so I started changing the story that food doesn't hurt me, that my body responds to my mind and not to something outside of me. It's I choose and decide in my mind what I'm going to experience in my body and in my world. And that's what I'm creating. And so I just want to tie it a little bit to the with Joe Dispenza is like when you are doing his work, which is he's just leading you to the work of yourself, I believe. You're taking your attention off of the senses here, like what you see, what you're experiencing day to day. And we're like, oh, I'm experiencing a pain on my hand, and you're focused on the pain, and is it ever going to go away? And then your energy is just on the pain. And so in the work, you use meditation to take your attention off of this 3D world, off of your senses, and into something greater, a greater, the energy that created us, the energy that is within us, the energy that's all around us. And you put your attention on that. And in that realm, anything is possible because it's all just energy and it's all just thoughts. So you don't necessarily, people that are healing through this work are just putting their attention and taking it off of the physical, off of the 3D, and onto something greater than themselves. And you don't know how the healing is going to come. It could come spontaneously. You could co-create it with something, but it comes to you because you're believing in another way, which is the source of everything, that it's love at the end of the day. We went deep on
Yeah.
that.
That's very deep. We didn't know what we were in for. But, it's the mind is very, very powerful. That's true. And so when you're talking about people taking their attention off the physical world, that represents your mind, your view of things. And we all have it. And it is a little hard to see, to step back and say, what one track is my mind on now, in whatever area of life, to be able to step out of that gives you the chance to choose something different, or like you're saying, you could do these practices and start to drop in new beliefs that are more helpful. I first, like, the idea makes sense. I know some people it's like a little bit hard for them to grasp. It's a little bit intangible. Some people even discount it, saying this is woo woo. But this really hit me when I learned another symptom I had was chronic fatigue, and I started researching and learning about it. And I came across these stories of people with severe chronic fatigue for years, and they got over it by doing things just like what you're talking about. Some groups are more like meditation focused. Some are, use the Joe Dispenza stuff. Some do other brain retraining. But just from that, and when I read, I was like, how is that possible? Like chronic fatigue, these people, some people can't get out of bed. Some people write about doing laundry once a month because that's all they could muster. I'm like the body's so weak and can't move. How is it possible they're getting out of that just from the mind? And that led me down some rabbit holes. I read some of these books about chronic pain too.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of chronic pain, like severe back pain. And there's, some doctors who will treat them more in this realm. Like they show them that their brain has hardwired that pain sensation. And so the pain, this is a really interesting point. Like pain comes from the brain. It doesn't come from your leg or your
Absolutely.
joints or your back.
Mm-hmm.
So that pain signal has somehow got wired in,
mm-hmm.
and then people through retraining can totally get rid of their pain, even if they have, like, this also kind of blew my mind. The one of the books I read by an MD, he said, like, I'll look at x-rays and some of them really will have like an issue with the disc, like it is off center or a little bit separated. He's like, but whatever, based on his experience, he's like, I know they don't need surgery, and if they do my program, which has a lot of similarities to what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, some huge success rates, like super, super high. So when I, experienced those things or learned about them, it really made me realize, like, wow, my mind is so much of a component of it.
Yeah. And just to add a little bit more to this, but I'll bring it back to the gluten. So one of the books that Joe Dispenza wrote, I know you're talking about some books as well, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And so to kind of even, this is a great way for people to think about it, is that we are on a trajectory. We're always doing the same thing, thinking the same thoughts, having the same stories in our head. And we don't even realize they're playing, right? Because they're from our subconscious, they're from childhood, they're from whatever. And in order to become the healed version that we want, we have to break the habit of who we were being before. And so let me bring this into the story is when I started doing this work and understanding what I did then that I was learning now, when I prior to giving up gluten, prior to healing, the person that I was being, I mean, I was learning, right? I was somebody that, you know, looked for approval in others or, wanted to be accepted in it or what didn't always say, didn't use my voice, didn't speak up, didn't, essentially you're not always honoring yourself or you're betraying yourself in situations where maybe you didn't want to, right? So that was part of me. And I didn't know it at the time. When I gave up the gluten, and like when you give up gluten, you have to go to a family event and you have to say, I can't eat any of that food. And you have to own that. And you have to ask for them to maybe either, can I bring something or can you make something that I can eat? When you go out to a restaurant, you have to speak up. If somebody offers you something and you're like, wait a second, that might have gluten, you have to say no. So in the choosing of going gluten free, I had to start showing up differently. And I didn't know, but I was breaking the old habits of betraying myself because I went all in. There was no 80-20 with this. There was either you're going to heal and you're going to do that by going all in and saying no when you need to say no and using your voice and choosing to do this even when you're in a situation where people are kind of annoyed that you're eating gluten free, because that happens a lot. I mean, I talk to people all the time and you know, the first part of that journey is saying that you can't eat the gluten at a party or something, and it's hard. So tying that into the Joe Dispenza work, it was I unconsciously was doing that work of changing and overcoming who I used to be. And I was becoming a new version of myself. And so there is that energetic signature behind the healing. Yes, the gluten was important, but there was also something behind that too.